Today we're going to do some 3D flowers, either 5 petals, 2 petals, or 3 petals. We're going to start with an imaginary circle. You're always going to pretend as if you're doing a flower inside a circle. This way your petals are going to be aligned. There's always going to be an imaginary dot in the center of the circle. This is where you're going to know where to position the tip of your brush to make sure they're all going to be aligned. Now I'm going to start with the 5 petals first, since that's the biggest one, and then I'll work around the 5 petals. Now, when you're creating a bead, make sure that your bead is going to be perfectly round and not too wet, because if it's too wet, it becomes flat as a pancake. And you want to slowly fill your petal to see if it's super wet. You will notice that if it's super wet, it will spread very fast. And you're just going to tap or lay the brush down lightly, very gently. When you're doing the second bead, make sure that you're putting it further away from the first bead or the previous bead. This way it doesn't overlap. Now, if you're trying to overlap, of course, that would be the best way, is putting it close, but this particular flower, you do not want to put the bead too close. This way, it won't drip into and flood the other petals. Now, don't worry about the size being really off. If you're getting a bigger bead, just try your best to do the same size. Or if you're quick enough, you can actually remove a little bit of the acrylic when you're placing it down on the nail. Now, sometimes when you add onto your bead, make sure that you are gentle with the tip of your brush. If not, and you bend the tip of the brush, you will have to replace your brush. Now, there's a little bit of a mistake on that little tiny bead right there. So what I'm going to do is I will replace that bead or either add more acrylic to make it a little bit more pointy. I will show you right there. I just added a little bit more because I made a mistake and took too much off. And sometimes you can go in there and fix it. No problem with adding some acrylic. Now, when you're doing 3D, you do have to move quickly because acrylic does get hard. It's not like gel, so you do have to move, especially when the bead is on the drier side. All right, you're going to angle your 3D brush. You're not going to place it flat, because if you place it flat, it wouldn't be 3D anymore. Now, it's okay if you're not doing 3D and you're placing your brush flat, but if you're doing a 3D versus a 1D, it depends on how high you're holding the brush. At a 45-degree angle is usually recommended. As you can see, my brush is not flat. It is at a 45-degree angle, okay? Now, sometimes if it's too wet, you give it a couple seconds. You can count in your head 1, 2, 3, and then you can go ahead and start molding it. Now, the acrylic was running down the nail, so I just took my nail and just removed it, so there is an extra acrylic running down on the side of the nails. All right, as you can see, I just put way big of a bead, so then I took half of it off. Sometimes you don't really know the scale of your bead until you apply it onto the nail, and then you mold it, and then you realize, whoops, it's way too big. So if it's wet, you can go ahead and just remove the extra part of the bead. This way would make the bead a lot smaller. The video is moving quite fast due to the simple fact that this is a very long video. If it was in real time, it would probably be, I would say, a good 15-20 minutes, because sometimes beads are very wet. And it takes you some time to kind of mold it. Now, you could do this quickly within 10 minutes as well. That's only if the bead is perfectly laid down with the right temperature and the right mix ratio. And today was a little bit wet due to temperature-wise, a little cold in the room. There you go. You place your bead down and you tap. You just kind of gently tap it. You don't want to tap it way too hard. Just gentle and mold it into kind of a teardrop. Okay. Now, since I know my beads are going to be on the wetter side, I do move it a little further away from each other, and then I slowly push it together. Okay. So go ahead and just gently do a couple nice little tap motions. Always make sure your bead is nice and round before you start molding it. As you can see, that's super wet, so I just tap it lightly and make sure my brush is not too wet. All right, everything looks great. Now I'm going to go ahead and use builder gel, or you can actually use regular gel if you like. Builder gel is less runnier than regular gel, and this is how I put my embellishments on. If you decide to put in glue on, you may, but glue dries very fast, so you do have to move quickly. I use a little tweezer just to apply it, make sure that it's nice and fast, easy for pickup, and there you have it. I'm going to go ahead and cure it.